We had a look at the hypothalamic hormones, but now I want to take a look at the pituitary hormones. So let's go back to our hypothalamus drawing and the hormones that we named from the hypothalamus. And let's go ahead and fill in the anterior pituitary hormones and the posterior pituitary hormones. Now, the anterior pituitary hormones I can create using the acronym FLAT PIG. This is one of the reasons why I use the pig as my homunculus. The first one, produced by cells of the anterior pituitary, produced by cells in this area, are going to be FSH, or follicle stimulating hormone, LH, or luteinizing hormone. These are collectively known as the gonadotropes. The gonadotropes are another name for those collectively. Gonadotropes. We also have ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, TSH, the thyroid stimulating hormone. Now this can also be known as thyrotropin. Thyrotropin, because it changes the thyroid. So another name for this one is thyrotropin. PRL, which is prolactin. Using this acronym, FLAT-PIG, I just need to remember that there's no I. So I say FLAT-PIG, but there's no I in pig. And then growth hormone. Another name for growth hormone is somatotropin. So growth hormone. Or we could say somatotropin. It's going to change tropin somatic cells, which are everything but sex cells. Okay, those are the anterior pituitary hormones. And it's nice coming up with that acronym FLAT-PIG, because every one of these anterior pituitary hormones corresponds, though are completely different hormones, to one of the hypothalamic hormones that is going to cause them to be released. For example, FSH and LH, the gonadotropes, correspond to GnRH. ACTH corresponds to CRH. That is, that CRH causes its release. TSH corresponds to TRH. PRL, or prolactin, corresponds to prolactin inhibiting hormone. Now, in this case, it doesn't cause its release, it inhibits its release. Now, for these two, we had one regulating them. So if we're going to have 6 anterior pituitary hormones that are controlled by 6 hypothalamic hormones, and the first 2 are controlled by 1, well, the last 2 better control 1. And growth hormone inhibiting hormone controls or inhibits growth hormone, and growth hormone releasing hormone causes it to be released. Now, you might see a theme here, and this is one of the biggest challenges. I've already gotten questions from some students. How do I separate out the hypothalamic hormones from the pituitary hormones? Are they the same? Are they different? They are completely different species, completely different chemicals. But one set of them regulates the other. Definitely separate these in your mind. Know that they come from 2 different organs, from different cells within those organs. But those hypothalamic hormones are going to go down and influence the release of the anterior pituitary hormones. So these hormones are going to come down and affect the release of these hormones. And each one has its corresponding. An easy way to generate the list is to remember flat pig, and that pig isn't spelled with an I, and find its corresponding hormone that regulates it. Now, there's a trick that I use. If it has the word releasing, inhibiting, or releasing, it's from the hypothalamus. After all, they cause the release or they inhibit the anterior pituitary hormones. Now, if it has the word stimulating or tropin or tropic, stimulating, or we could say thyrotropin stimulating hormone, or tropin, somatotropin, okay, it comes from the anterior pituitary. So if it has stimulating or tropic, gonadotropes, gonadotropin, gonadotropic. If it has stimulating or tropin, it comes from the anterior pituitary. If it has releasing or inhibiting, it comes from the hypothalamus. But there's something you need to remember. Because these inhibiting and releasing hormones control tropic or stimulating hormones, sometimes these have that word tropin or tropic in their name. This was somatotropic inhibiting hormone, somatotropic releasing hormone. So, if it has tropic in it, think anterior pituitary. Tropic for the anterior pituitary hormones trump or override that these have tropic in it. But these ones will have also releasing and inhibiting. So if it has tropic in presence of releasing or inhibiting, you know that it's from the hypothalamus. Now there's one more group I want to talk about, and that's oxytocin and ADH. These come from the hypothalamus, but they are released from the posterior pituitary. Now, we have a basic concept here, and that's that these are glands. Remember, a gland is one or more cell that makes and secretes a particular product. These are all glands. The anterior pituitary, the posterior pituitary, the hypothalamus, or even the individual cells. And glands make and secrete a particular product. Okay? Now, the rule is the same cell that makes the product secretes the product. That's always true. Now, there's a point of confusion here with these two, because they're made by the hypothalamus, but they're released by the posterior pituitary. Now, one or more cells that make and secrete a particular product. These cells make the product here, but they send axons down and release it from a different organ. The rule still applies. The same cells that made it release it. It just happens to be released from a separate organ. This is an exception that you have to think a little more deeply about when you apply this rule. Oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone, or ADH, or vasopressin is another name for that. Vasopressin is another name for ADH. Is made in the hypothalamus but released from the posterior pituitary. Okay, so now we've separated out from our homunculus the 8. Now, 2 of those kind of cross over. The 8 hypothalamic hormones, the 6 anterior pituitary hormones, and the 2 posterior pituitary hormones. Know their names well, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the relationship between the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, the hypothalamic pituitary connection.